let's get scratching.
We got an explosive broadcast coming to you. Listen up. Sega games, just keep playing them.
We're back. It's the SEGAbits Swingin Report Show. Live. Get ready for Sega interviews and news.
Hello and welcome to the SEGAbits Swingin Report Show Live. We are back. It's been a while. What's that song? It's been a while. But we are here. I am in a new space. I am talking to a new person, and it's all new, all 2023, even though I've been doing some stuff in early 2023. But I am talking tonight to BillyTime Games. We will call him Bill for the duration of this episode, as we're going to be calling him for the duration of the episode. And he is the, I guess, the creator, the hacker of Ghostbusters Special Edition. And I wanted to talk to him about how he went about creating this. I wanted to talk to him about the whole ROM hacking community. But before we do that, I want to hear from you, Bill. What was your first Sega console and game?
Oh, easy. That was a Sega Genesis, and details are a little fuzzy, but it has to be somewhere between Sonic 2 and Street Fighter 2 Special Champion Edition. I love both those games, near and dear to my heart.
Nice. So, what year did you get your Genesis?
If I was to guess, I would say 1998. We were late bloomers.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, we bought it off of a family friend for probably about like $20. Got a big box of games, plugged that old school RF adapter. Had like Ren and Stimpy in the collection. I think like Mortal Kombat 3. Just several games.
Nice. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the story a lot of people have coming into the Genesis late. And I think it's because Tom Kalinske was really pushing, he was the CEO of Sega, at least in the early to mid-90s. He was really pushing that the Genesis could maintain itself for a full decade. Unfortunately, they pushed the Saturn, he left, and you know how things went from there. But yeah, it really was kind of an evergreen console. It had a long life to it. And did you find yourself really noticing as you were playing these games, like some of the early titles versus some of the later titles, or they all just kind of mixed together for you?
Yeah, I'd say so. There'd be some games that, like, even nowadays I would see and be like, yes, I love this game. And then there'd be other days where, like, I go and see, like, another game and she'd be like, eh.
So where does Ghostbusters fall there? Was this a game that you owned at the time?
This is a game I still own, as a matter of fact. I've held on to my hard copy, got it for about $30 off of Amazon back in 2007, 15 years ago. And as a matter of fact, I have it sitting in my office right next to my newly minted copy of Special Edition. I just got the Master System version of Ghostbusters.
Nice.
I played Ghostbusters for the first time on Genesis back from Bloodlust Software, the old school Genesis emulators on DOS back in 2003. And I loved the game. Played it front to back. And it was just, I don't know how to put it. It was just like one of those things where from the moment go, I was in love.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think something I find really interesting about the Genesis Ghostbusters, outside of being very different from every single other version, it's not a different version, it's its own game, and I think that's what a lot of people forget when you see wiki entries for this. It's always Ghostbusters on Genesis, Mega Drive, NES, and I'm like, no, it's a completely different game. You shouldn't be bunching these together. And I think where it stands out is there aren't that many platformers like it on the Genesis, especially licensed ones. It's forgiving. It has almost kind of a Mega Man vibe where you can pick where you go from the beginning. The item shop, it's very non-linear with the weapons and items. The story's unique. It's not a retelling of any of the movies. And we do another podcast called Sega Talk where we do like a retrospective. We go back, we talk about the development and the gameplay. And something that really struck us when we were talking about Ghostbusters was that the villain is like a friend of the item shop guy or the weapons shop guy. I forgot which one it is. And it's such a weird and kind of cool and out of the ordinary twist. Like, I've never seen that happen in a game before, where this NPC you haven't really thought much of is suddenly a part of the story. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, it's a strange title, but it's a fun title. But it was always lacking something. And we'll get into that because you actually released a ROM hack of this game. And so for yourself, do you like the term ROM hacker, or is there like another title that you prefer?
Hacker, ROM hacker, it doesn't really make too much of a difference. I enjoy either or. Mm.
Now, what would you say separates like a ROM hacker from a game developer? Do you see like crossover there? Maybe there isn't that much of a difference. It's all depending on what sort of work you're doing at the time.
I think there's a bit of a difference between a ROM hacker and a game developer. With a ROM hacker, we're just already working with a engine that's been around, it has been documented. A game developer makes everything from scratch, and they have all these hoops and stuff to jump through. So I definitely don't want to take anything away from game devs.
Right. But it's interesting. It should be noted that some prominent developers sometimes get their start in ROM hacking. It's almost kind of where they learn the ins and outs and the basics. One that comes to mind, we've had him on the show in the past, was Stealth from Headcanon, who got his start doing a lot of Sonic the Hedgehog hacks. And then he went on to actually, work on Sonic Mania, Sonic Origins, which is coming out, the Plus version's coming out later this month. So with that in mind, like, do you know, I guess, what sort of basics do you learn, and how do you teach yourself to get into this sort of thing? Like, do you go read tutorials? Do you just kind of go in and get your hands dirty and figure it out on your own? Like, where's the starting point?
How I started, I was working with Super Nintendo a little bit. I was kind of hanging around the Game FAQ forums talking to a gentleman named Jay Lucas, because we were working on hacking the Super Nintendo game Addams Family Values. And then right around, I'd say March or May of 2020, I had a lot of time on my hands as a result of the initial lockdown from the COVID pandemic. And so I wanted to sink my teeth, and I wanted to learn how 68,000 assembly worked as the main code for the Sega Genesis. So I wanted to start off small. There was one game I really liked called Eternal Champions. And I figured maybe I could start off with something as little as making Game Genie codes. So I contacted Tony Hedstrom over on GameHacking.org, and he was very patient. He was very kind with me, and he just kind of walked me through some things on how, like, simple addition, subtraction works, how to utilize trace logs, and various debugging tools to find what I need to look for when I'm just kind of like digging through code, rather than just kind of poking at stuff and just seeing what sticks to the wall. And then eventually I started getting good enough at it that I was able to start picking apart different system functions. And then I started getting into crazier and crazier things.
Yeah, I want to get into some of your other projects later in the show, but I did notice you definitely have an interest in kind of quality of life improvements, adding game saves, password systems, things like that. I know from experience that I've downloaded, my fair share of games from the internet, and I've just recently been starting to learn that there's certain letters that designate what that ROM is, and I realized that a lot of the time I'm actually playing manipulated or hacked versions of games this whole time that have actually improved the quality of life. And so when I'll hear people talk about certain games that I've experienced, they're like, oh, the health meter's terrible. I'm like, really? I had no trouble with the health. And I realize, oh, I've been playing someone's edited or manipulated version of the game. So what are your thoughts on just kind of as a service to fans of the games and just creating like game saves in that sense?
Really my philosophy when it comes to hacking games is I don't necessarily like think about anything outside of my bubble. I just kind of work on the hacks that I want to. So I'll go and look through like my box of games. I've got like maybe about 100 or so. Some in box copies, some in loose copies, and I'll just kind of scroll through what I've got and be like, well, what did I like about this game? What did I not like about this game?
Right.
And sometimes it's as simple as that. Sometimes it takes like a couple weeks, and I just kind of sit there and just think what I could do next.
Yeah, I always found it interesting, especially with like the early Genesis and Master System games where they'd have high score modes, but it doesn't save your high score. As soon as you turn off the console, it's gone. And so I think that's a great addition to some of these games to be able to at least have a hack of that game that you can return to, and it maintains those scores. I actually have a 1950s pinball machine over here by me, and along the side, I've never cleaned it off, is about a decade's worth of people in like the 80s and 90s writing their high scores on the side of the machine in pencil. So it's definitely been a staple of video games that has, I think actually it hasn't gone away. It's become more prominent now, especially when a game first releases and people are like, I'm at the top of the scoreboard. So it's very cool to see something like that added in, as just a nice personal thing for people to hang on to and have their high score handy with them. Now I have some gameplay footage playing. This comes courtesy of Hack Games Long Play channel, and people are going to be seeing kind of an unfamiliar sight if they know this game. It's Winston jumping around. I just get a kick out of looking at him. Hopping around, the big head, little bodies, like the Funko Pops of their time. The art style of this game just gets me. But I want you to tell us a little bit about your Ghostbusters fandom and like how into the franchise are you? Or is it more of a fan of this game in particular?
No, I definitely say I'm a fan of Ghostbusters. I remember my earliest memories were from the real Ghostbusters cartoon. I always like watching the intro. It was just such a fun kicking time. But eventually, like, I got into the movies and whatnot, and loved all the actors, loved the script and how everything played out. I love the equipment that they use, and I don't know. I guess I could say I've just been a fan since I've been a kid.
Yeah, I mean, I was born 84, so I've kind of come to really connect to the game because when there's an anniversary, it reminds me of how old I am. I'm like, oh shit, I'm 39 this year? No. But it is a franchise that has always been with me, but it's definitely grown on me in recent years. I have a 5-year-old, and she just like really got into Ghostbusters, especially real Ghostbusters, and so I was like, well, there's I'm not cutting the video yet because I don't want to screw the show up, but there is a proton pack behind me that I did the HasLab. I couldn't say no to it, and it's such a fun franchise. I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain. It's like it's got a little bit of the lore like Star Wars does, but the comedy of Back to the Future, but it's like laid back like the movie Groundhog Day or something. It's just got all these odd, fun little elements, like SNL meets like ghosts and like action and adventure, and it's such a strange franchise that no one's really been able to replicate. I've recently gotten to know people like Jason from Ghostbusters News, the people over at Phantasm Toys who do a lot of custom toys, And then Chris Sorrentino of Real Ghostbusters, I have some of his art prints. I've hung out with him once, and he's a real cool guy. So it's such a chill community of people. And I'm sure you've noticed that, like, when this game came out, like, it got a lot of attention. A huge reaction, not just from fans, but video gaming sites and nostalgia websites. Did that size of the reaction surprise you?
Oh, absolutely. I I was blown away.
It was wild to see sites like Bloody Disgusting going, oh, hey, remember Ghostbusters, Sega Genesis? Like, I always saw it as kind of a hidden gem, so to see all these people reacting to it kind of surprised me personally. Like, between us, no one's listening. Do you think a majority of the people reacting to this special edition that you released ever actually knew about the game, or that Winston wasn't in it? I feel like more people are suddenly remembering this game existed than I recall.
Yeah, I think maybe it might just be like one half of, folks didn't know that the game was there, and then like the other half kind of remembered like the AVGN talk about that very briefly.
Yeah, that's true. And so with that in mind, was Winston's absence from the game really what made you want to create Ghostbusters Special Edition, or were there other things in the game that you just felt needed a little fine-tuning and finessing?
It started off with Master Lin Kuei. He's one of the programmers for the project. He messaged me, and he had a little bit of interest in wanting to do it. And originally, it was just going to be like a quick sprite swap. And I had my initial reservations on like, hey, I don't know if this is actually going to be a thing. And then I think after maybe about a couple weeks of doing a little bit of research, to like something click up in my head, and I messaged him back and said, hey, I think we can do something with this. And from there, it definitely snowballed into its own creation, so to speak.
Now, on a technical level, is the Ghostbusters game like easier to work with than, say, like a game like Sonic the Hedgehog? Are there some games that are just more difficult to hack than others? How does that work exactly?
Oh yeah, there's many different ways that you can approach assembly, and there has been many different ways that other developers have approached assembly. For example, hacking Ghostbusters will not be the same an experience as, say, hacking Mega Man The Wily Wars, for a couple different reasons. One is that the code structure is different, because probably somebody took a different open-ended approach to programming the game, but also there's different things like graphics compression. And what really helped with Ghostbusters Special Edition was a good chunk of the graphics were decompressed and ready for us to work with and edit without having to go and get a third-party tool or having to jump through hoops just to make something work.
Interesting. So when you were going through this, did you find that there were things that were just not possible? Like, for example, on the title screen, there's those 3 portraits that appear. Is there any possibility of adding characters to that, or in the select screen, or is that kind of a limitation of the game?
For the select screen, at first we found a limitation, as the portraits are only loaded in once. So when Peter, Ray, or Egon select and they smile, everybody frowns. Those are already loaded into the graphics from the moment that the character select screen boots up. So before you even pick a character, that's all set in stone. So we didn't want to try and rewrite graphic routines, and potentially mess something up. So it was my idea to go with this idea of having like a silhouette, just kind of like darken out like the character select portrait, and go from there. I was heavily inspired by Street Fighter in that aspect, because they have the character Akuma. When you go to pick him, he's got a completely shadowed out silhouette. It was just like, okay, so we could kind of treat it like a secret character, like Street Fighter.
Right. Yeah, and I noticed too that during the cutscenes, there they're included either by taking lines of dialogue from other Ghostbusters or having Winston there in the background. So you will, and I mean, I don't think it's any secret to some people watching that Louis Tully is also unlockable, and he appears in the cutscenes as well. So I'm assuming that was a bit easier to change up the cutscenes in that regard.
Oh yeah, absolutely. From how that works, there's the three portraits are loaded in, and when Winston's selected, it's literally just a RAM switch. It checks to see if there's a check in the RAM to signify whether or not Winston or Lewis has been selected. So it'll load up an entirely different set of portraits from Peter and Egon to have those guys in the conversation as opposed to the other two. And that also applies to like the main sprite set, because when you have in the internal game code, you have Peter, Ray, Egon, and then we have an entirely different sprite set where it's Lewis, Ray, and Winston.
Okay. Yeah, I'm actually, I was just showing now here. So in that one scene where they're all standing in the firehouse, is that like a static scene, or is Winston standing in the background there? Is he like a separate element of that?
We redid that whole segment. It's done in a couple layers. You have like the actual firehouse, and then you have like the three Ghostbusters, Winston, and I think like the Tetris screen on the computer is like a separate layer altogether that goes over the firehouse graphics. So we redid that entirely just so we could include Winston. And then we had to play with it on a technical level because it only gave us like so much screen space to work with. So we had to expand the amount of space we were allowed, so to speak.
Right, yeah.
I'm going to be saying that, so to speak. So I apologize in advance.
No, that's fine. I mean, I'm glad you added him back in, because if you play the game, the story kind of picks up after the first movie, and they're talking about how they need work, and Winston's not in the entire game, so it's like kind of the sad what if story where the Ghostbusters like fired Winston right after the first movie, and it's just to not see him there is so odd. When we did our Sega Talk episode, we kind of speculated that perhaps it's a Japanese thing, or it was a limitation with the game, but it was very odd to see him omitted. But we've seen him omitted in other things like the poster, VHS box art, things like that. So it very well could have been contractual, but this did come well after the first movie. I think this game came out, 1990, 1989? 1990. So, yeah, no excuses. But yeah, let's talk about some of the secrets here. So if people download this, they'll get a text document. And so there's like a very handy numbered list of secrets. This isn't all of them, though, correct?
I was actually just going to keep them hidden, but at the end I was like, I had a change of heart. I'll give everybody the goodies. But that should be the end-all, be-all of all the secrets. So it's one of those things where, like, open at your own peril.
Right. Well, if people listening don't mind, we'll go through some of them here, and you can just tell us either some development stories, your thought process of including these, whatever comes to mind. The big one, number one, is Director's Cut mode. So this has saves disabled, and can you explain, too, the difference between the ectoplasm patch and the, what would you call it, like the normal special edition?
That's simple. I did the pure patch for speedrunners. I've been talking to a few folks that have an entire forum on speedrun.com. They wanted to be able to run the game at GDQ eventually, so I'm hoping to see that in the future. I hope I didn't spoil that for anybody in the future. So what I wanted to do was something for them where we would have like the new characters, but we wouldn't go so far to deviate from the original gameplay. So that came down to having the original health values for, say, like the coffee cups, or just leaving bugs or anything as it was, just completely untouched gameplay.
That's interesting you mentioned that, because the coffee cup was a big thing, that the first big change I noticed outside of playing as Winston. Because if you play the original version of the game, there's these coffee cups, and they take, I don't know how many shots, but it's an insane amount of shots. They're not really dangerous. They're just moving in a circle. But you stand there for the longest time shooting at these coffee cups, and you corrected that. So now they break much quicker, and it's just, it's I don't know. It's just a nice quality of life improvement.
I just didn't think Folgers was that strong.
Yeah, good one. Yeah, but it's just it was an oddity. Like, it was kind of a fun little thing. You're like, if you show the game to someone, you're like, hey, look at how strong the coffee cups are. They're the strongest enemy in the game. Yeah, so director's cut mode, you hold BC and left and press start at the title screen. When you implement these sorts of things, like, does it really depend on could you dictate anything would start it up? What was like BC left and start is oddly specific. Like, do you have to use those sorts of codes? How does that work?
Oh yeah, it does that. I think there's like a check for every cheat code and every button combination when you go to hit that start button. There's one to check if you're loading the game. There's one if you're entering nightmare mode. There's one if you're entering a secret code. And I coded it to be specific just because it was just easier that way, and I could keep account of all the different button combinations. Because we were on hiatus when I started coding all the cheat codes. Okay. And I really wanted to have a lot of fun with this game. Because it was one of those things, when I'm done with it, there's a good chance I'm just going to be done with it and not come back to it. So I really wanted to make this hack in particular count, because when we first made the announcement that the hype train was real, we had pro wrestler Kenny Omega reach out and say that this project looked awesome already, and like all we had was a screenshot. That's great.
Yeah, I remember that. That tease was from quite a long time ago. So you started with nothing but a screenshot, and you already started to see the excitement that people had. I think we even like newsed it or something like that. But yeah, looking at director's cut mode, it has an overpowered Winston, stats restored. So what's that all about? He's high speed, high stamina. He's high all around.
Oh yes. When we first started programming this, yeah, let me see that. Sorry, my daughter just walked in. I'm just gonna turn that down. Oh, I turned that off. When we started working on the project, we were going to have Winston be completely overpowered. He was going to be stronger than all the Ghostbusters. Mm-hmm. In the sake of balance, we kind of toned him down to just so he didn't eclipse the other Ghostbusters, but still kind of have him be his own thing. Right. I also wanted to have each Ghostbuster have like character-specific perks. Ray, for example, was going to have infrared goggles. He was going to start off with 9 of them. Egon was going to have phaser shell right from the rip, and then we were going to have Peter, who's just Peter. This was before we were going to have Lewis in the game, so there wasn't really much thought past that put in there. And eventually, like getting towards release, I kind of had second thoughts on having all this extra stuff, and I'm like, what if they don't like the changes? Maybe I should just kind of dummy this out last minute. I know, like, I promised that this was going to be in here, so this was a way for me to compromise. Okay. So I could have all these extra features in the game without them interfering with the game itself. And that just kind of worked out.
So with the base game, the original release, was it a very balanced game? Because I recall that, like, picking one over the others made it just a better experience. It never really seemed like a very balanced game in that regard, outside of just giving you more of a difficulty level, basically, by having kind of a stunted Ghostbuster.
I guess I just tried to just keep it from being overpowered and just being a cakewalk. I just kind of wanted to like bring some of it back down to earth. So it was a little bit more than just a leisurely stroll.
Right.
That was one thing I've worked on in my hacking career, is just trying to find that right amount of balance. So it's not too overpowered, but it's not cheap and unfair.
Right, right. And the extra items too were a great touch, just because it's nice to have that perk. Unlimited bombs was another addition. That was a very popular one. I remember with Game Genie. I always would implement that. It's just so fun to, just constantly have the bombs going off. But again, the saves are disabled, and this is on Ectoplasm patch only. A lot of these are Ectoplasm patch only. Did you look to like Game Genie codes that you enjoyed in the past and just thought it's better to have those implemented as cheats?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I figured too, it better to be, to have those than to have somebody just kind of dig through the game code. That way,
Right.
I don't know, just something fun, something extra for the player. It was a little bit more accessible to folks, especially since like I don't even have a Game Genie myself. I used to.
Yeah, they're great for the Tower of Power, but I would I would always default to doing unlimited bombs, unlimited health on this game, and I think there was one with like a lot of money, just because it is a really fun game, but if you just want to sit down and just like chill and enjoy it, it's not for that. It's a little unforgiving. You definitely need to manage money, things like that. And so I appreciated too, I'll just roll through these real quick, unlock all weapons and double proton pack damage. So just some easy ways to make the game a little more accessible for people. I really appreciated those. Now let's get to number 5 here, the message from Carpathia. This was a really funny addition. You want to talk to me about what led you to implement this?
Originally I wanted to add a harder difficulty. I'm not sure what possessed me to do that, but I just kind of went with it, and I used a program called Add Introgen. I had a custom one that was built for me by Arcade TV, and his work was absolutely instrumental in some of my formative hacks, and I can't thank him enough for just the tool alone. But we use this program so when you go to hold the B button, you're greeted by a message. I took the graphics of Vigo from, I believe, Ghostbusters 2 on NES, and I colored it myself in Paint.net, and then using this tool, we implemented it into the game to make it look like it was an actual cutscene that you would see, where Vigo would challenge you to take on Nightmare Mode. And that was pretty much it. I just wanted to have an excuse to have Vigo there. just pull in anything and everything that wasn't nailed down in as far as Ghostbusters lore to truly make this special.
Right, and then Nightmare Mode itself. Talk a little bit about that. That is, I did not make it far. What's it like implementing a super hard mode in a game that never had one?
Like all the other cheat codes and whatnot, there's all sorts of checks in the game's RAM, going between like transitioning from say like over to the firehouse, going into a level. This one in particular, this will take away all your lives, all your continues. It will bring your health cap lower than what you would see over in hard mode. The game is set to hard mode. And I believe that's all the changes I implemented. Oh, it takes away your inventory too. So like the Peking duck, the bombs, the infrared, all the money that you have. Takes away everything. And I had to put a check in there to make sure that, and really, really make sure that this wouldn't accidentally trigger during normal gameplay, because we've bug tested this, I think, 200 times. And there was one time where I would go to play like on normal or easy, and oops, I accidentally activated nightmare mode.
Right.
I'm in trouble.
And so how do you make it so that the enemies have different movement patterns? Like, I I honestly know very little about. I guess I don't know if you even call it AI, but like how enemies operate in games of this era. How do you make it so that they're more difficult to players? Like how does that work exactly?
Well, for the nightmare mode, we still kind of kept it at hard mode. That much is untouched. It's just that we gave you less to work with. So it's definitely a mode where you kind of have to claw yourself out of a bad situation and
Okay.
just kind of work from there. So it's a little more inventory intensive rather than um, just difficult from the get go.
Mm.
And
So
I
it
guess
isn't.
that's yeah.
Yeah.
There
So it's
there
more
are
of
ways.
an
Oh, I'm
like
sorry.
a it's like a money and item management nightmare, if anything. And
Yeah,
then
to start you off.
I could have sworn the enemies are they a little more difficult at all in nightmare mode?
Oh, I know in hard mode they take more hits and they're a little bit more aggressive.
That's what
The
I
little
remember
pink floating
experiencing.
ghost that when you first enter Home Sweet Home, they usually fire one pellet at you on normal and easy, and here in hard mode they'll shoot two instead.
I gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that's what I was experiencing, and it was too much for me. But uh, you also have a really cool addition for fans, I guess, of you'd say the real Ghostbusters, where they get these alternate colored jumpsuits. So you have pink, red, and green, and these are selected at the character select screen. I did notice too that it would also alter colors throughout the game for select items or select text. So I'm presuming this is what would be like a palette swap, correct?
There is several checks in the game to adjust palette wise.
Mm.
And they do affect like the HUD during main gameplay, like the candelabras and whatnot that you would see, or I'm sorry, the chandeliers in like Home Sweet Home, for example, because a lot of that uses the same palette. Um, the whole palette system was inspired by Street Fighter yet again,
Okay.
and again I had a lot of time on my hands. There's probably about let's see here, 6 to 18, like maybe like 24 checks overall in terms of pallets, because we
Wow.
needed to make sure that the pallets were accounted for in the firehouse, on the I've got it screen, in normal gameplay, and Winston has his whole entire set of pallets just to accommodate for just him.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring that up too. So it's a game with three white characters, and then you're adding a black character in. So in that regard, are Ray, Peter, and Egon all pulling from the same color then, or color palette? Is that how it would work?
In the normal firehouse scene, yes. In actual gameplay, no. We have an extra set of color palettes to account for Winston's skin. And so there were some hurdles to get around that just to make sure it didn't mess with the graphics uh, at some integral parts of the gameplay. For example, when you go to enter the castle with Winston and Lewis, the cutscene with Arthur is bypassed because they
Okay.
both share the same palette, but we couldn't compromise having them with separate palettes. So we
I
just
see.
kind of worked past that. But we did figure out how to use a separate palette for when you go to fight the possessed Ghostbusters. And again,
Huh.
it has that RAM check in there, so thankfully there is no issues with running into a Ghostbuster that shouldn't appear. You'll either see Ray, Peter, Egon. You won't see any of the secret characters.
So, with the knowledge that you gained from working on this project, would you say that they had no excuse to add him to the original game had they the chance?
I don't know if I can really Excuse anything. I mean, I didn't really. I wasn't there when they made it, but
Right,
to
right.
be honest, if you were to ask me what my opinion was, I would say they just didn't have space with what they were given to work with.
Mm,
The 512 KB ROM, or I think it's like 4 megabits,
right.
what they would call it. There is simply just no room to work with. We expanded the ROM to a 8 megabit or megapower, one megabyte, in order to fit everything that we wanted to, and we still have room if we wanted to fit more in there. It's just we just kind of stuck with what we had and called it a day there.
Right. Right. Okay, that's fair. So it very well could have been a time issue, a memory issue. Um, Going back here then to the list of secrets. I see two here: Mr. Stay Puffed image, as well as an ecto cooler recipe hidden. One's hidden in the graphic editor, one's hidden in the hex editor. How would how would a dummy like me find these things?
I mean, on the technical side of things, if you were to use a graphics manipulation program like YYCHR to go and take a look inside the internal graphics, you'll find that headed towards the end of the ROM. We took the graphics for Mr. Stay Puft just smiling, just left him there, just to kind of potentially scare somebody.
Okay.
And then we have the, here we go. It's at towards the end of the ROM in a hex editor. The ecto cooler recipe that I found from San Diego Ghostbusters, and I'll actually read it to you now. Per serving, 4 cups Tampico citrus punch, 1 cup Minute Maid lemonade, and then after you get done making all the servings, add a drop or 2 of green food coloring, and then you just stir.
I've made that.
It's great.
Yeah, it is good. Yeah, when I found out Walmart had that, I bought like 3 bottles, and then I was like, how am I going to get through this? I only wanted 1 cup. But yeah, it definitely tastes like the original thing. That's really cool. So, I mean, who knows? Maybe someday this ROM will be all that survives, and people are going to find this ecto cooler recipe thousands of years from now.
That was the idea.
I knew it. Um, Another bit here, you have bonus money. Again, that's kind of a quality of life thing. And then a region switch. So what is this region switch, and how would that affect the game?
This was a code that we got off of, I want to say it was like the cutting room floor. Master Lin Kuei presented that, and it was like, yeah, we restored all the cheat codes from the original Japanese version. As far as I know, I don't think there's any region locking to the game. I think really the only thing that would interfere with being able to play this on a Japanese or European console would probably be the shape of the cartridge itself more than anything. So I haven't really found a use for it. The money code, though, I definitely had to make sure that that counts as an active cheat. So,
Right.
so nobody can use that to cheese any of the game saves or nightmare mode or anything in between.
Right, right. And then going along with that, you also have infinite lives, infinite health, which I'm sure are not new to people who played this game on the Game Genie. And then, of course, we have another playable character. We've mentioned him a few times here, Louis Tully. So he's kind of almost like a joke character just because of his low stamina, low speed. But it's so fun to play with him. He's got the little earmuffs. Why did you add him? I mean, I know why, because it's Lewis, and Lewis is great. But what was the genesis of Lewis being added to the game?
New Ghostbusters 2.
Yeah.
I wanted to have something as close to that experience as possible. That was another Ghostbusters game that's near and dear to my heart, and I always thought that it was awesome that it gave you just this wide selection of Ghostbusters to use. But I'm not a fan of just simple sprite swaps.
Mm,
So I wouldn't put somebody in the game for the sake of them being there. I kind of wanted them to have some sort of purpose or functionality to them. Um, so I made Lewis absolutely terrible. So he has the worst damage output. I think Egon, if he gets hit, he takes 4 points of damage. Lewis is 5, and I gave him Ray's speed. So the idea was have this inexperienced Ghostbuster, pair that with Nightmare Mode, and now you have the ultimate challenge.
Right, and that's where I really saw that the differing stamina and speeds really come into play well there, because it is, I mean, obviously it's a gimmick to play as Lewis, but it's also fun because you get the thrill of seeing him go through some of the most difficult areas, and you're like, wow, I made it as Lewis, in his earmuffs. I never knew why he wore earmuffs, but in any case, yeah. So I mean, that's the list I have here. Is there anything I missed in terms of additions or changes to the game? Wasn't there a musical cue that was new to the game, or was that just me?
Yes, Master Lin Kuei added that one in. There's a little jingle when you're going to enter a new case, and that was taken from towards the end of the game when you had the mayor's assistant barge into the firehouse.
Okay.
And it was it just really kind of like helped build to the tension.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, because that was one of the other early additions that I noticed, and it's just I don't know, it's a different addition. It's something my ears were not expecting. Speaking of things that you listen to in the game, have you ever listened to the demo tracks that the original composer for the game put out on YouTube not too long ago?
Oh, several times.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on those? They're very interesting, right?
Oh yeah, no, they didn't sound anything like their in-game counterpart. But I will say I absolutely love the apartment theme, both in-game and the demo track.
It is, the music of the game is just like unbelievably catchy and good. I mean, there's a reason why a lot of Ghostbusters YouTubers actually stick it in their videos behind while they're talking, because it's just, I don't really know what else the composer of the game actually worked on outside of Ghostbusters, but it is really next level, especially for a licensed game, which I feel like I say a lot when it comes to this game, just because you don't expect so much love and care to go into a licensed game at this time, especially something coming out 6 years after the original movie came out. I'm looking here, yeah, so it was, what is this? Kazuhiko Nagai, and it was his music demo tracks. We have them up on the site. October 13th, 2020 was when we newsed them, but yeah, outside of that, I think he worked on the Mega Drive release of Rambo 3, as well as the game Mystic Defender. So yeah, it's very interesting to hear demo tracks of Genesis music. Was there anything in there that, I mean, if you had all the time in the world, would you ever go back and do any other musical or sound effect additions or alterations?
I don't know. I don't think I would. I kind of liked the music and the sound design, just the way it was.
Yeah, you can't mess with a good thing. So that's cool. So if people want to play this game, they there's a process to it, right? I know the ROMs are out there, but you can actually also get a base ROM and apply this to it. How does one go about that?
ROMhacking.net has an online patcher which helps automate the process. So basically, you provide the ROM, you go and you can patch your ROM through the web browser, which I think is a great addition that they've added over the past 2-3 years or so, maybe a little less. But what you'll need is just the ROM that's stated in the README file. I'm not going to tell anybody where to get it or how to get it, but
right.
Assuming that you have your hands on it, you just run it through the online patcher. It'll give you either a red X to signify that you got the wrong ROM, or a green check mark to signify that you got the right one. And then from there, you just simply hit patch, and you're off to the races.
And that's kind of a way to keep everything above board with the ROM hacking. I know companies like Nintendo, they are not very friendly to that. I want to step outside now of Ghostbusters and talk about some of your other projects. Do you have any favorites? I know you did Sonic 1 Emerald Safari recently. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I ended up doing that one out of hope to getting all 3 Sonic games with these new mechanics, and I was thinking of like the Infinity Gems. I'm a big Marvel guy,
Mm-hmm.
and that was something that inspired me, was the idea of like the Infinity Gems and collecting them and gaining all these extra powers. So it was just some random eureka moment I had during the course of my day where I said, well, what if Sonic got these Chaos Emeralds and they actually did something individually rather than collectively?
Interesting. You know, I don't want to blow your mind, but I think that's what Sonic Superstars is going to do.
Ooh.
I
If I
think,
beat him with a punch, that's going to be something.
I think you might have, because I was watching the trailer and I think you get new abilities from the emeralds. So there's like a multiple Sonics, and then like Sonic turns into water. So yeah, you were ahead of the curve there. So people can find you, of course. We have a link in the video description here at romhacking.net, and if you want to get specific, it's /community/5637. That's your address there. And there's a lot here. There's Super Hang-On, Sonic, Vector Man, Sonic 2, which also has an Emerald Safari, and then of course Ghostbusters Special Edition, which we've been talking about here. People can also find you on Twitter, correct? And then you have a YouTube channel. Did I miss any other social pages where people can find you?
No, I think everything's covered there. I will say though, there are some other projects that I have floating around through my YouTube channel via archive.org that, for just reasons being, doesn't apply to the romhacking.net policy, or just doesn't really like fit anywhere else, is available in those locations. Like, for example, I have Sega Channel Revival, which is a complete offline version of basically a reconstructed offline version of Sega Channel, a re-envisioning, if you will. And just with the nature of how those are built and how those are distributed, those are off in a faraway land. But also I have my first ever homebrew I did and released April 1st, Ultimate Marvel Quiz Quest. That started off as a Super Mario World hack where I turned that into a Marvel trivia game. I ported that over using a visual novel engine.
Oh, wow.
I have the source code and the latest version of the game available through my YouTube as well. And I went all out. I worked on that all month. I did all the art. I wrote the stories. I came up with like 30 different stages. There's about 240 some odd questions. I could be wrong with that number.
Oh, wow.
So there's a lot to sink your teeth into. And I even designed a brand new password system, and there's several Easter eggs in there. I'd say there's probably just as many secrets in that game as there is Ghostbusters.
That's awesome. So people can find that at your YouTube channel?
Yepers.
That's awesome. Well, great. Well, before we close out, I'm going to switch over to the video. Hopefully it doesn't cut you off. Let's see. I think people can still hear you. So, yeah. So, again, I just want to thank you so much. And then I had a few Ghostbusters shout-outs. I mentioned him earlier in the show, my friend Chris from Real Ghostbusters, REEL. He's going to be at the actual Firehouse in New York on Saturday. They're doing an event there, and he's going to be selling and giving away prints, I guess. So he's done some of these, so I'm holding them up. Ghost Fever Grips New York. He likes to redraw scenes from the movies with the Real Ghostbusters characters. So he's a great artist. You can check his stuff out. And Billy, too. I just really appreciate your work on what you did with what I would consider probably my second favorite game next to Sonic 2, Ghostbusters for the Genesis. I was going to note, too, I I bought this used, I think like alongside Sonic 2. And by used, I mean like a week after Sonic 2 came out. I went to the store, I wanted to buy it, and they had Sonic 2 used, and they also had Ghostbusters used. And the funny thing is, if you look at the back of the game, it actually has the name of the place I went to, and if you can't see it, it's Gamebusters. And so I bought my copy of Ghostbusters from Gamebusters. So, kind of fitting. But anyway, do you have any plans for Ghostbusters Day? You gonna do anything Ghostbusty, or is this the extent of your busting?
Yeah, I think this is the absolute limit of where it's all going today.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I was very excited to be on here today.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And actually, I wore the shirt. This came
love
from
it.
Phantasm Toys. They have them up on their site. But yeah, no, I
work my way
greatly
at getting
appreciate
one
you
of
coming
those.
on. Yeah, you need to get one. I mean, maybe you hack Winston into it. How do you hack a shirt? I don't know.
Ooh,
But the last question I was going to ask: do you have any future revisions planned for this game? Is the version out there the final version, or is there more to come?
for now, I'm gonna say this is the final version. Definitely one of those things. If we have something to really work with, um, we'll definitely come back to it. I myself, if we ever do come back to it, I have some pretty gnarly ideas as to what to add. Definitely another character for sure.
Janine?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Amy Rose is getting all this play nowadays. You got to give Janine some play. But yeah, that would be sweet. I'm looking forward to that. Well, never say never. I'd like to see some more surprises in this game, but maybe you can stick Paul Rudd in there and get some press when the next Ghostbusters movie comes out. You never know. But hey, thank you so much again. Like I said, it's BillyTime Games. Check them out on romhacking.net, and we'll have the links in the description below. Thank you so much for taking the time to jump on and talk about Ghostbusters Special Edition. And have a great night, everyone. And we'll see you next time on the next Sega Talk. We're doing that next week. It's a surprise. I don't know what it is. And the next SEGAbits Swingin' Report show, I think we're going to have, and I think I have their game back here. Let me get it. I think we're going to have indie developer on. We're going to be talking about Red Moon Lost Days, and this is the first commercially released Sega Saturn fan game, which is just wild. So hoping to have them on next month. We're also going to have Sega 16's Ken Horowitz is going to come back on. He wrote a fantastic book about, I believe, Bally Midway Pinball. I'm just starting to read it now, so it's going to be great times, lots of retro talk here on the Swingin' Report show. So have a great night, and any closing words, Billy? What would the Ghostbusters say? I don't know.
I've got a quote of my own.
Okay,
you
go
can
for
do
it.
anything in this world as long as you're willing to put your mind to it.
Wise words. All right. Good night.